بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Appreciate the warm welcome and introduction. And I'd also like to thank the Islamic Education Center for the invitation. Special thanks to your religious director, Sheikh Shinawi, for reaching out to us so that we could participate in this great function. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you in your efforts, and to bless your community, and to continue to bestow upon you the goodness of this life, to take you into the goodness of the next. Say La ilaha illallah. Imagine for a moment you hear those words as you just did. These are very familiar words to us as Muslims. In fact, most of us, these were the first words we heard when we were welcomed into this world. Our father was filled with joy and excitement, perhaps overcome with emotion that he almost forgot those very words, but he mustered up the courage and he said those words into your ear, calling the adhan and the iqamah. We find joy in these words because they remind us of this moment, the moment of new life, a new beginning. In addition to the family, a blessing of children, something that the prophets and righteous of the past, they all supplicated, asking Allah to bless them with. Maybe these words you heard, La ilaha illallah, were the first words you were taught, the first kalima. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs us to know, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know that there is no deity worthy of worship except Him. It's in these words that we find conviction. Our faith is defined by La ilaha illallah. The fundamentals of our belief reside in these words. So you hear them again. Say La ilaha illallah.
La ilaha illallah.
Perhaps you heard these words in front of your congregation. Someone from outside comes in and wants to join you, and they embrace Islam. And they stand in front of your crowd of, it looks like a couple hundred people on Friday, and they say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And when they say that, what do you say? Takbir. Allahu Akbar. And you are so excited. You're filled with joy and delighted that someone unknown to you, perhaps a stranger, someone from a different walk of life, would believe the way you believe and join you as a brother or a sister. Perhaps you embrace them and welcome them. You may go to the extent to offer your daughter's hand in marriage, or your son as a possible candidate. That happened to me, so I'm speaking from experience. I did not accept, by the way, but it did happen. We find hope in these words, La ilaha illallah. Because when we see that person accept Islam and they utter those words of faith, we know that their sins have been removed. They have been forgiven. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, أَمَا عَلِمْتَ أَنَّ الْإِسْلَامَ يَهْدِمُ مَا قَبْلَهُ. Do you not know that Islam comes and it erases or wipes out everything that came before? We hear the words, La ilaha illallah. I want you to close your eyes for a minute, for a brief exercise. Please close your eyes, and I want you to think for a moment. While you're sitting there in silence, you hear the words, La ilaha illallah. Say La ilaha illallah.
La ilaha
Well, you hear these words, you begin to become familiar with your environment. It's cold. There are familiar smells. Picture the walls around you, they're white. You can hear sounds in the background, electronic beeping noises. You can hear the footsteps of nurses and doctors coming in and out. It's very sterile and cold. White sheets. Open your eyes. Where do you think you are? You realize that you're in a hospital. Say La ilaha illallah. Right here and right now, these are not the words of the adhan being called in the ear of a newborn. This is not the shahada being uttered by a new Muslim. What you're hearing is the talqeen. The talqeen is an encouragement. An encouragement given to someone who is at the brink of their death to say La ilaha illallah. The great scholars of our tradition, they say that it's sunnah. It's highly recommended that when death descends upon someone, that these words be encouraged to say by the softest, most gentlest, perhaps member of the family or friends, that you moisten the lips of the ill with moist cotton to help them produce these words. La ilaha illallah. At that moment, when you hear the words, as you're in that hospital room, you realize it's not you that's dying. It's not you that's lying in the bed, but it's you that's saying them to someone you love. Imagine, some of you have been through this before. Imagine standing there, holding your mother's hand. Your mother who raised you, who was constantly looking after your care and concern, took care of you from the moment that you were born. You're holding her hand and you're saying, La ilaha illallah. Imagine perhaps not your mother, but your father. While you're standing there in the room holding your father's hand, who was much like a tree in your life, strong and dependable, taking care of you, providing for you. From the fruits of his labor, you were raised and nurtured, and you're standing there saying to your father, La ilaha illallah. Please say these words at least once. Utter these words. Perhaps it's not your father, but it's your son. Your son is lying there on the hospital bed. Many of us here, we have our children with us today. Your son who brought you joy. The moment you called those words into his ear, you're now saying them in a very different situation. Say, La ilaha illallah. Brought you honor, pride. He was an heir to your family. Maybe it's not your son, maybe it's your daughter. Your little princess. The jewel of your crown. So sweet, so soft, so loving. And you're saying to her, La ilaha illallah. These are the words that we will bid farewell to our loved ones as they pass on. These are the words that will be said to us as we too pass from this life into the next at the moment of our death. Brothers and sisters, remembering death, it's a prophetic practice. I wasn't taking you through that exercise to picture perhaps one of life's most challenging moments, to stir your emotions, but it is emotionally challenging to imagine, if you haven't gone through such an experience before, to imagine that for a moment is something required of you now. Prophet ﷺ, he encouraged us to visit the sick. He encouraged us to visit the graves. He encouraged us to take part in the process, to be familiar so that it's always on our minds. I myself, in my position, I have the opportunity to volunteer at a number of hospitals as a chaplain. And I get those calls when people are sick and people are ill. They're not sure if they're going to make it, to come and visit them, to guide them through a process. It can be very difficult, especially if you're not prepared. And it can be even more difficult if it's your phone call. If it's a call for you yourself and you're not ready. So the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to remember death. That be a part of our daily routine. By remembering death, we are quick to repent. We're hasty to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us. Remembering death, it satisfies the heart of this life. When you think about your death, you're no longer thirsty for the delights of this world, because you know the next is just around the corner. And it also increases your drive to worship Allah, to be more devoted, to be more pious. Someone who is mindful of their own death is truly a special person. The Prophet ﷺ was asked about cleverness and intelligence. It was reported by Imam Tabarani in his collection of hadith. Someone came to the Prophet ﷺ in a group of 10 people, and he says, Ya Nabi Allah, man akyasun nas wa ahzamun nas. Who are the most clever, the most resolute? The most clever, the most resolute. Now, before I walked on stage to stand in front of you, someone introduced me and they said he graduated from here and he went to school to there, and etc. And he could have gone further. And many of us have those credentials to our names, and we often judge each other's intelligence based on education, based on credential, based on experience, based on position. I am an executive director. I am a doctor. I am an engineer. I am a truck driver. I am a sanitation worker. The Prophet ﷺ answered the question, the most clever, the most resolute, and he says, أَكْثَرُهُمْ ذِكْرًا لِلْمَوْتِ. Those who remember death the most. وَأَشَدُّهُمْ اسْتِعْدَادًا لِلْمَوْتِ. And those who prepare for death the most. These are the clever ones. These are the resolute ones. He says, أولئك هم الأكياس ذهبوا بشرف الدنيا والآخرة. These are the ones that they will leave with the honor of this life and the honor of the next. He will leave with the honor of this life and the honor of the next. So, you may not like to hear it, and it may be something that you fear, but you're dying right now. You are already on your way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, ثُمَّ إِنَّكُمْ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ لَمَيِّتُونَ. Then indeed after that you are to die. He began this talking about your creation and how you were brought to life and how you were formed, your structure, and ends with this statement. He says, ثُمَّ إِنَّكُمْ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ لَمَيِّتُونَ. And after that they are sure to die. The word mayyitun was also used to describe the Prophet ﷺ. إِنَّكَ مَيِّت وَإِنَّهُمْ لَمَيِّتُونَ. It says, you are mayyit, which means you're dead. But what's interesting to note from the great linguistic scholar Ibn Mandur, he has this huge dictionary, Lisan al-Arab. He says that the word mayyit, it's applicable to one who has passed away and died, and it's also applicable to a person that is to die soon, meaning they are still living. And so Allah Azza wa Jalla uses this word to describe our state of being. Every moment of every day that goes by, we are that much closer to our deaths. There is absolutely no escape. Absolutely no escape. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, أَيْنَمَا تَكُونُوا يُدْرِكْكُمُ الْمَوْتُ وَلَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُرُوجٍ مُشَيِّدَةٍ. Wherever you may be, death will overtake you. It will seize you, even if you should be fortified in lofty towers. You cannot hide. It is a fact of life. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He mentions this fact. He says, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Every soul will taste death. The question is not, are we going to die? But the question is, how do we want to die? Those moments, lying in that hospital bed or in your home or wherever it may be, how is it that you want to die? Will you be able to say, La ilaha illallah, as you said it so many times here, as easy as it was for you to utter those words, at that moment of your passing, will you be able to pronounce those words, to leave this life with honor and dignity? There's the next stage to this, death. The real moment of tasting death is when the soul leaves the body. Yes, right now you are made up of two major components, a physical component and a spiritual, if you will, or metaphysical component, and that is your soul. We have the limbs and the organs and all of the liquid and everything, and then you have this soul that was placed in your body while you were in the womb of your mother. And it's said by some of the scholars that when the body is no longer able to contain the soul, it is when it passes and dies. And the soul is removed. And the soul can be removed in essentially one of two ways. And this is narrated by Imam Ahmad in his collection of hadith. He talks about two different types of souls. There's a good soul, which is tayyib, and there's an evil soul, which is khabith. It's foul and repugnant. The good soul is the soul of the believer. It says when the believing slave is about to depart this world and enter into the hereafter, there come down to him angels from the heavens. They have white faces. It's like bright like the sun. They bring with them shrouds from paradise, which have perfume. They sit there with him. And there's angels as far as the eye can see, a procession, if you will. Much like while your body is being washed, there is a procession following your body to its grave. Your soul is being welcomed by a procession of angels. And the angel of death comes and sits at your head and begins to call you out of your body. He says, O pure and good soul, come out to the forgiveness and the pleasure of Allah. Calling you to Allah's pleasure of His pardon. Begins to coax you out of the body. We're afraid often of death because it's something that's unknown to us. And so, with this welcome, if you will, through your transition, your soul is allowed to come out in an easy fashion. It was described as if it was like the last drop falling from the lip of a cup or a pitcher. And then you're met with the angels who begin to call you by your best names, and you're ascended to the heavens, and you're greeted by Allah. You're greeted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you will be returned back to this world to rejoin your body. This is number one. The second is the soul which is foul and repugnant, al-khabith. It's a very, very different experience that occurs. The Prophet ﷺ describing this almost opposite to the first case, that when the moment of your death comes, if you lived a life of sin and denial, transgression, disbelief, hypocrisy, that the angel of death will come to you and begin to call you out. Repugnant soul, filthy soul, come out to the punishment of Allah. And the soul is described to want to cower down in the body. The soul wants to shrink down. Sometimes, if you remember, some of our young kids, they do this. They get scared at night and they tuck themselves up under their blanket. They bring their legs up to their chest and wrap their arms around their bodies, trying to contain themselves and be as small as possible, to hide and to flee from fear of harm and danger. And the soul will do the very thing. It will shrink down into the body, trying to make itself as small as possible until the angel of death reaches in and rips it out, described by the Prophet ﷺ like a barbed wire ripping through wool, snapping and breaking everything on the way out. And you will be wrapped in a shroud, not that of paradise, but like one with nails prodding at your soul, piercing, painful. Your odor will be repugnant, and the angels that are there begin to address you. Who is this foul, repugnant being? And you will be lifted up into the heavens, perhaps to be greeted in some way, but the doors of the heavens, they will not be open for you. They will be slammed shut, and you will be cast down back into your body. And the angels will be there waiting to ask you a number of questions for your second test. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us in this life with righteousness and piety, to strengthen our faith, to guide us to that which He loves and is pleased with. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure those of us that are ill, those of us that are suffering from hardship and disease, and that He strengthen those of us that are weak, both in faith and body. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.